Hello, everyone. I am Ericka Patillo. My pronouns are she, they, and I do want to acknowledge and honor my geographic, cultural, and intellectual ancestors. And it's particularly important or meaningful for me to be back at Sills and roaming through Manning Hall. Um, and sort of feeling the presence of my intellectual ancestors. So, my role at SILS this time around is as professor of the practice and also as associate dean for academics. So, as professor of the practice, I am privileged to bring my practical experience um, back to SILS, my experience as a librarian and also as an administrator. As associate dean, I am responsible for um, sort of leading our academic side of the house, so to speak. My background includes music. I would be remiss if I did not mention music. I studied and played the harp for decades, and I taught music around the Tidewater area of Virginia. And I mention that place because if any of you all are familiar with Tidewater, there are a lot of cities in the Tidewater area. And as I moved from city to city, playing gigs and also teaching, I realized I had a library card for every one of those cities. And so it finally hit me at some point, oh, maybe you should look into this thing called librarianship. And so I did, discovered librarianship and started, figuring out how I could accomplish becoming a librarian. Ended up at SILS, and I'll even disclose that that was 1997. So that's been a few years. Um, Once I graduated from SILS that first time, I started work as a music librarian, and I started at the University of Houston. And I mentioned University of Houston particularly because there I quickly moved into some managerial roles, and the management training there was awesome. Okay, so at the university level as well as in the libraries, and that's not the experience that most folks have. So I was really privileged to get that experience, that training, and it really helped sort of springboard me into being a student of management. And I'll mention also, I have worked at 5 universities. So I've had some experience in, again, good management and bad management. So that leads me to my research interests. Um, Broadly speaking, it's organizational behavior. So, organizational behavior looks at how organizations accomplish their mission. How do the organizational players, the actors within the organization, um, know and learn their roles? How do they interact with each other? And again, how do they work together to accomplish the mission and objectives of the organization? So, more specifically, I look at academic library middle managers. I am a cheerleader for academic library middle managers. I think they can rule the world um, as long as they are empowered to do so. And I shouldn't say rule the world, but definitely contribute to the effectiveness and efficiency and the mission of the organization. Our middle managers face several challenges, and I used to um, supervise middle managers and be a middle manager myself. And so that really, again, sort of um, is what initiated my interest in studying them. In terms of um, my scholarship, the overall theme is sort of about conflict and ambiguity. So, looking at conflict and ambiguity, um, role conflict and role ambiguity in particular for academic library middle managers. So we understand that middle managers are right in the middle, right? They've got folks that they report to, they've got folks reporting to them, and then they have peers and other stakeholders. All of these different players are sending them expectations, and sometimes those expectations are in conflict. And so the middle manager themselves have to deal with these competing expectations, and they use a variety of different coping mechanisms um, to deal with those competing expectations. Some of those are positive coping mechanisms, and some are not so positive. Another way in which I look at conflict and ambiguity is in terms of values versus policy. So how do we deal with the cognitive dissonance of our beliefs and our values being one thing, and sometimes sort of bumping up against policies that aren't in alignment with our values. So for instance, I've looked at the inaction of ALA values within organizational contexts. For example, for queer employees and for our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. Sometimes, again, those things are not in alignment, and it causes some issues for the employees. And in particular, it can affect recruitment and retention of the folks that we are saying that we, want to bring into our communities. So currently, I sort of see myself as a more of a coach, mentor, supporter, and enabler. Enabler of good things, I hope. I actually mentor several academic, early career academic librarians. And I find, again, they're dealing with this idea of conflict and ambiguity a lot as well. I'm also co-writing the Library Information Management textbook with my SEALS library colleague, Rebecca Varga. We are, again, privileged to be continuing the work of one of my mentors, Barbara Moran. And finally, what I'm hoping to do, what I continue to do is work on bringing mindfulness into the workplace and aligning my attention with my intentions. I guess I should mention also that I am teaching this term INLS 151, Retrieving and Analyzing Information, which is an undergraduate course. And I'm really excited about teaching the undergrads. It's been a while since I've done that. So I'm delighted to be back at SILS. Thank you.